Our next interview is with Phil McBlain of McBlain Books. Phil, tell us a little bit about your background, family, schools, where you grew up, etc.
My father was a Methodist minister. I grew up in Iowa. I attended a prep school out in New England on a scholarship that I won through being a paper boy. And then I went back and attended college at Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa. And then I went to Harvard Law School and graduated from there in 1968, came back and practiced law in Iowa for 5 years. Had a friend who opened a used bookshop and said fatefully, "Phil, you ought to collect books." And I realized I liked that a lot better than I liked practicing law. So I did both for a while, and then in 1973 I quit practicing law and became a full-time bookseller with my wife Sharon, who is my partner in the business.
How's your daughter?
She's doing well. She's living in Carlisle, Massachusetts, has a 4-year-old daughter, planning to come to the fair and see us on Sunday, and things are going well for her.
You're a typical overqualified bookseller, educationally anyhow.
Well, I don't know if you can be overqualified. I mean, there's nothing you can really learn through education that doesn't come up and prove useful at some point.
That's true.
Didn't necessarily need it all.
So you got into the book business in '73 after you decided you no longer wanted to practice law. What did you decide to specialize in, or didn't you specialize at that time?
Well, when I started collecting books, when I was getting out of college, I had a dilemma. We either wanted to be a lawyer or specialize in African studies. And so when I started collecting books, I collected books on Africa and African Americans. Hard to say exactly why, but as a kid living in Iowa, small towns, no African Americans in town. Occasionally African American would show up at our door because the local restaurant wouldn't sell them a meal, or the local motel wouldn't give them a place to sleep, and they'd see if they could eat with us or sleep at our place. And so it just, you kind of felt curious as to why African Americans were treated the way they did. And that's why actually, after I'd gone to a prep school and been accepted at Harvard, I decided to go to Simpson College because I'd always wanted to go there, because that's the college that had been willing to accept George Washington Carver when he'd wanted to attend college. After I graduated, I found out that they had let him come there, but they'd made him live off campus, and he'd had to support himself by taking in laundry, but still they let him attend.
That was nice of them.
Well, it was.
You have a great interest, not just in African American studies. I noticed that a lot of your inventory has to do with Asia as well.
Well, it does. I mean, we really, initially it was just Africa and African American material, but traveling around, I needed to have enough areas that I bought books in that I could travel profitably, because initially we were buying basically, I suppose 90% of the books we bought we were buying from other dealers, because it was a time when a specialist could buy books from general dealers and mark them up. And really African American material, which is still my love, is just too uncommon. And the collectors are also too uncommon. So we added other areas. We added Asia really because my friend who'd gotten me into the book business had issued catalogs on Asia and Latin America, and then he decided he didn't want to be a bookseller anymore. He wanted to go back, and he ended up getting a PhD in economics and been a college professor. Middle East we added because we bought North Africa. We bought the whole continent of Africa, but people interested in sub-Saharan Africa weren't much interested in the Middle East, in North Africa. So at some point, in a fit of frustration, I said, I'm going to go out and buy 5 books on the Middle East and put a catalog out and call it North Africa and the Middle East. Then I found I really was interested in the Middle East. The Arab-Israeli conflict and all the other permutations, the obsession with oil and what it's done to the world, and the conflict between the so-called great religions. I found really, at this point, I really like Middle Eastern material. I don't buy as much of it as I buy African American, but I really find in Asia, again, I find that very interesting. You know, the interaction of Western civilization, who sees himself as so superior to everybody else. It's interesting to read about what they did to the rest of the world and how the rest of the world has tried to cope with the Western barbarians. So it's a nice. I like the mix of specialists we had. I mean, obviously in this internet age, I buy a good collection of rare books on any subject.
Right.
But my favorite is still African American.
You sort of led into my next question. With regard to the internet, we all know how the internet has affected our trade. What percentage of your business do you do via the internet, and has it been a blessing or a disaster?
Well, it's definitely not been a blessing. I mean, where we specialize, because it's so much of what we did, I loved scarce scholarly books, and I loved supplying books to scholars and institutions, not just the rare books for the rare book collections, but good books that they needed to have. And the internet has made that, you just can't do that because those books are readily available on the internet. Mm-hmm. And I sort of realized that the money I'd been making, I thought it was, if the books were just worth more than the local dealer had realized they were. But I've come to realize with the internet that the books really are worth what they now sell for on the internet. It's just that if I had them, I used to be able to get a big finder's fee for them. So I can't do that anymore. Right. So for a specialist, it's changed what we do. We probably have 15,000 books on the internet. Wow. And, I don't know, 25, 30% of the business or something.
Not much of the business.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's just, our books are well suited to the internet. A lot of them, it's just, unfortunately, our customers are in Beijing or, occasionally they're in countries that isn't so easy to ship books to safely. But an awful lot to Western Europe. Americans don't really like books in foreign languages, and a lot of our good books are in foreign languages. So if we have a good book in German on China, it's not so likely that an American collector or institution is going to buy it. Often it'll be, more likely to be somebody in the UK or somebody in Germany. So I don't regard the internet as a blessing. I don't regard it as a curse. I mean, I think it's inevitable. Globalization seems sort of like the tide of the ocean. You can't do anything about it. You just need to adjust and get out of the floodplain. And we've been trying to do that till I see another great collection of those so-called scarce scholarly books and think, do I buy it or do I not buy it? How stupid would this be? Usually I resist these days.
There is some resistance now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I try not to be foolish. I don't really want to accumulate more of those former $50 books that are available on the internet for $10 or $15. I don't want to try to compete at that level because neither Sharon or I operate that efficiently that we can make money selling books, no matter how quickly we try to process them.
The other question I was going to ask with relation to the internet, do you find, as some have said, that the print books on the internet seem to be a race to the bottom?
Well, on the books that there prove to be a supply that's greater than the current demand, sure, because. And particularly as you get these larger internet operations that have book pricing programs that automatically reprice so there is a constant downward pressure, and I'm sure I can if I get a book that I thought was a wonderful book and I see there's 23 copies copies on, and the prices range from 20 to 100. I'm not going to price it at 100. I'm going to price it at 20 or 18 or 25 or something. So I'll contribute to weighting it toward the bottom.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily underprice, but I price at the bottom, which makes more copies available at the cheaper price and makes it harder for the price to nudge up.
When you first started in the trade, who were some of the people who were like mentors to you, or people who you would go to for advice?
Well, it probably would have been better if I'd gone to more people for advice. I really like the African American material, and so University Place Bookshop in New York, Walter Goldwater and Bill French. Walter was quite a bit older, and we had some useful conversations. Bill was about my age, and I don't know that Bill was a mentor. He was really a colleague that I enjoyed. He certainly didn't help me figure out how to be a bookseller or which books to buy. I think I figured most of that out by buying the wrong books and saying, these don't work. So it took me a while to understand that buying the rarer books was really a more sensible way to proceed than listen, the first trip I made, I think a lot of the books I bought and paid $3, $4, $5 for in my first put in my first catalog for $7.50. The economics of that didn't seem to work very well.
And not today, anyhow.
Yeah.
That's for sure. If you were entering the book trade today, how would you do it, or would you do it?
Well, I'm not sure I would. I mean, and I think it'd be much harder to enter now than it was then. I mean, one of the nice things when I came into trade I started full-time book selling in '73, first catalog 1970. Books were really relatively so inexpensive. There wasn't much of a capital requirement to set up a business. And Sharon and I certainly didn't have any capital. No, we just didn't have much capital. I mean, we didn't have family money, and we didn't. Although I was practicing law, I was practicing law in Des Moines, and that was before associates and junior partners got paid a lot of money. So I was able to do it, and I was able to do it really not very wisely, without much money, and sort of flop around for a few years till I figured out a few things. And then of course, I wouldn't say Doug Harding was a mentor to me, but Doug, as you know, Doug and I, for many years, used to travel around together and buy books. And Doug was somebody who was willing. I really wanted, when I traveled to buy books, I wanted to travel and see as many places as I could. Yeah. And Doug, whose interests are almost entirely the books, also was willing to, see the first person we could see the earliest in the morning, right, and the last person we could see the latest at night, and then drive late at night to the next place we were going to be. And so that was I think for both of us, it worked out well traveling together. And there were years where I think Doug and I were on the road together for probably several months, not at one time, but I'd buy books, ship them back to Iowa, race home, catalog them, to get a catalog out to fund it, and race back out, and Doug and I'd head somewhere else.
Doug's an interesting guy to go traveling with, I'll tell you. You seem to have no issues with transforming your business from what it was to into the computer age. Was it easy flow for you, or did you have your difficulties?
Well, I didn't really feel there was a choice. I mean, it just seemed like that was what was happening. I mean, Sharon and I, as each thing has happened, when the internet, when the computers came along, we certainly were not the first to go to computers. We wanted to wait until PCs had large enough memories that it seemed like it could accommodate the stock we had, because we've always had a fairly large stock. And on the internet, we missed the golden first years where listing books on the internet sort of sold books on the internet. We waited until listing books on the internet meant you'd sell some of them.
When did you become computerized and be on the internet?
I think we went to computer about 1990. As to when we went on the internet, it's honestly, it's not a year I'd care to remember if I could, but I don't.
Okay. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing the antiquarian book world and booksellers as we look to the future?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but one thing that bothers, I mean, it does seem with the internet and the globalization of the trade and forcing everybody to go more and more into the rarer and rarer books, it does make antiquarian booksellers more sort of purveyors of objects. You know, I loved it when people bought books to read them.
Read them, yeah.
I mean, to cherish them, but to read them. And I feel that, and I'm not sure. I mean, it seems to me that's a trend that probably is going to continue to develop. And I'm not entirely comfortable with having to sell books as objects. I'm not so comfortable with the prices of books. I mean, I really, you know, for us where we did African American material, the years where, you know, the first years we exhibited at the Boston fairs and some of the others where African Americans hadn't come much to the fairs,
no.
and we could as we located, we could send them notices and they would come, and you know, the books were $35, $25, $50, $75, sometimes $100. I mean, they were within the range of affordability, and as the trade has developed and there's more and more pressure to see if you can get more, and at this point I feel that, you know, there's a number of books I sort of feel like I'm holding them for ransom instead of offering them for sale, and that's not an entirely comfortable feeling. But I don't see any way around it. I just think, and it's one reason why I think somebody like me who had the interests and the desires I had in the 70s, I'm not sure the book trade today would be something that would appeal to me as it did then. It just seems to me that it's not quite the same thing. It could just be a function of age, but I think it has evolved.
It certainly has. Just now, lastly, before I let you go, Phil, if there's one piece of advice you could give, a young man comes up to you and says, "Mr. McBlain, I want to be a bookseller. Please advise me. What's the best advice you could give someone at this juncture?"
I think if somebody wanted to be a bookseller, I think it'd be a good idea to work for an antiquarian bookseller for a while,
As an apprentice.
and you know, and really get a sense for what the trade really is all about, and see if that really is what they'd like to do, because I think the romantic notion about bookselling is not entirely correct, and I think there's a lot of effort. There's a lot of salesmanship involved in selling books at the prices we're selling them at now, and there are a lot of other things that, you know, there's a lot more to book selling than just finding books and sitting around and waiting for somebody to come around and buy them while you have great conversations with them.
Those days are gone.
They seem to be.
Well, I remember asking this exact same question to Doug Harding, and I think you'll understand his answer when Doug said to me, the most important thing to do is own your building. That was his advice. His advice was own your own building.
Well, and I think that makes sense. I mean, you remember when we first came into the trade, what was it every bookseller thought they had for their retirement? Their collection of their reference books. Yeah, now? The building.
Now it's your building.
And we don't have a building.
You know, I have a house. But
That's right.
Phil, thanks very much. Enjoyed it.
You're welcome.